So the i7-4790K stock cooler actually is quite small. There's a small fan and a small heatsink. When you compare that to the heatsink that you get on the 212 Evo, you can see it's much larger with more fins, which means it can dissipate heat more readily. Also, the fan is a lot bigger and a lot more efficient on the 212 Evo than the stock cooler. So here's a quick preview of the results whilst idling. So the distance to TJ max is higher, which of course means that the core temperatures are lower overall, and it's now not thermal throttling when the CPU is under large loads. The first thing I did was to remove the stock cooler. So I undid the black pins around the sides here, and then just gave it some gentle wiggles to try and release it from the thermal paste that's holding it to the top of the processor. The next step was to mount this little bracket onto the back of the motherboard, which goes on either forwards or backwards depending on which socket type you have. In my case here, it goes on this way on the back of the machine. The green tape you see on there is to prevent any electrical contact between the case and the bracket, so it should be left on at all times. The screws that they give you have a little plastic washer that goes over the top, and they have a slight flat edge which lines up with the flat edge on the actual bracket itself. You get this handy little screwdriver adapter which allows you to easily tighten up the nuts on the back of the motherboard. When tightening the nuts, it's best to go top left, bottom left, top right, rather than going round in a circle. With this done, the next stage is to clean the thermal paste off the CPU. So I did this just using alcohol wipes, but it would be better to use some isopropyl 99.9% alcohol. I removed all of the thermal paste just by pressing down quite lightly on the CPU to try and avoid causing any damage. And I found it quite useful to open up the locking mechanism just so I could make sure that I'd got all of the thermal paste off. Next I applied the thermal paste that came with the cooler to the top of the CPU. There's no real guide here on how much should be applied, so I just kind of played it by ear and hoped that it was the right amount. It's super important to make sure that the plastic cover is removed from the bottom of the copper pipes that are going to be in contact with the top of the CPU. If this is forgotten, then you won't get a decent thermal connection and your temperatures will run high. Now I just place the cooler lightly down onto the CPU and just make sure that the thermal paste is in good contact with all of the pipes and all of the CPU. Next, I place this little bracket in between the heatsink fins and the copper pipes. There's a nice little guide to show you how to line this up based on the socket type that you have. This next part can only really be described as a lot of faffing. Lining everything up was proving difficult, and I was quite unsure about how much pressure I should apply to the motherboard, but eventually everything lined up and everything was tightened correctly. Once I was happy with the alignment and the tightness of all of that, I put the case back onto its feet and just attached the fan with the 4 clips onto the side of the heatsink. I then plugged the fan into the CPU fan power socket. So that's pretty much it. All that's left to do now is turn it on and enjoy the benefits of the new cooler. If you made it this far, thanks for watching. If you found this video useful, please give me a like and consider subscribing. Until next time.